Hi, everybody. Tim Hughes here. I'm the co-founder and CEO of DLA Ignite. With me today is Robert Tearle.
Good morning.
And today we're going to talk about the fact if you've been laid off, how do you get a job? And we're going to talk through the process about that. Also, Robert has an offer for you. Robert runs a job seekers advice portal, and he can basically give you access to that at the end of the video. Before we go any further, Robert, where can people get hold of you?
If they look on LinkedIn and they look for Robert Tearle, Tearle, there's only three of us, and people will recognise me from the photo. And the other people don't do anything like what I do, so but they'll just find me easily. It's Robert Tearle.
Tearle, yes.
Yeah.
I think the best way to describe you is that you're a headhunter.
Correct.
Yes.
Not only am I a headhunter, actually, strangely enough, with regards to job search and the situation that we're in at the moment with COVID-19, is that I've actually seen this 3 or 4 times before when there's been previous recessions and where people have been in job search mode. And then the last one, 2000, 2008, 2009, I first became very interested in this subject. How do people get back into work?
And so for the first time ever, I'm using slides.
Yeah.
I think whenever any of us have lost a job, we've always gone through a cycle, and I think it's obviously some it's about breaking that cycle, but I think it's worth you going through in terms of the feelings that we will have, because everybody has them.
Yeah, I mean, to a certain degree, there's no magic solution to help people get through this. And some people will actually feel very aggrieved by losing their jobs, very sad by losing their jobs, very down by losing their jobs. For others, it may actually sit in the background. But if it is that somebody's been let go by their employer company, the likelihood is that they will feel slightly down. And there are some issues with regards to that. The first of which is on a day-to-day basis when they're in job search mode, rather than actually getting on with the job, making applications, doing positive things, they become distracted and they feel down. Maybe they don't get as much done in the day. And instead of making 10 applications, maybe they only make 3. So that's the first thing. And the second thing being is that when they go into the mode of speaking with prospective employers on the phone with a phone screen, or when they get into an interview situation, what often will happen is that they'll be talking in a very negative way about being made redundant. And importantly, what can happen is that they'll start talking a lot about their old job. Somebody say, "What's your situation?" They start banging on about their old job, and all it needed was a succinct answer, because effectively what they need to do is to start talking about the company that they're interviewing with and what that company is looking for somebody to accomplish in a job. So it's also almost important that people try to just clear their mind and just be conscious that this can be a problem.
I think there's a certain amount of, to use a diving metaphor, a bit of decompression.
Yes.
I mean, we've all had jobs where it didn't go well or something happened, but we learned something. Mm-hmm. And I think that it's important that before we go into interviews, that we have a positive, it's not necessarily a positive spin, but we sit down and go, okay, what is it that I've learned from this, and what were the good things? And in fact, there's going to be hundreds, if not thousands, of people who are going to be in a similar situation.
Correct.
It's not like they shouldn't feel shame or something like that. It's going to be part of the way. It's going to be over the next year, or at least next maybe 2 years. It's going to be part of the way that we live.
Correct. And I can give some tips later on with regards to how people can sort of maintain, morale. But on just an immediate basis, before we move on, I think just 2 or 3 things with regards to this. The first of which is that we're sort of sat at home a lot, particularly if you're unemployed. Try get out every day, do some exercise, go for a walk. 1. 2 is when you're sitting down in your job search area around your desk or whatever, have a clear desk. It creates a clear mind. 3 is actually focus on the fact that you will ultimately get a job and have a positive mindset around that. I'll give another tip later on, but I think let's move on to the next sort of area.
Okay. Let's see. That's B.
Bingo. Okay. So, the situation at the moment is a job seekers market, which is fundamentally different to what most people have experienced, before. Since 2010 to the present day, 2020, we've sort of been in a period of economic prosperity. The economy's been growing, the demand to employ people has been high, and effectively the number of available opportunities for work has exceeded the number of candidates available. We're now in a situation whereby it's now the opposite, and effectively there are fewer jobs for people to go after, which causes a problem. So people, when they're going into job search mode, are going to be looking for a job that's going to be the same as they had before, better than they had before, but there's not going to be sufficient jobs to go around. And therefore what that means is that some people are going to have to compromise. And I think people need to understand that, with regard to the ultimate outcome as to what's going to happen at the end of their job search efforts, is either, if they're lucky, they get back into something of a like-for-like nature. That's the optimum, preferred choice one. Two is they get into something that's a compromise, maybe not quite as good as what they had before. If, for argument's sake, they're paid 100 units a year, maybe this now pays 60 or 70 units a year. Maybe it's not quite as senior, maybe it's not quite as prestigious, maybe it's somewhat of a compromise. Then the third scenario is effectively they're taking a no-skill, low-skill job on a sort of minimum wage kind of scenario. That's their worst-case scenario. And for anybody that happens to, ultimately, they'll get back up in life. Okay, so basically, for anybody who's lost their jobs at the moment, ultimately they will get through. Okay, everybody gets through.
And I think that there's a great opportunity now in terms of you have time to do some things maybe that you haven't had time to do before. So you could go back and do some education. You could get that MBA that you have always said that you wanted to do. You could basically take 6 months off in terms of and go and work on land, do something completely different, and bet or hope that the job market changes by the time you've got back, but that you would learn a set of different skills.
Correct. And I think that is something that, it does present a window of opportunity. It also presents a solution to those people that don't get back in and don't get what they ultimately want. And I think that, there's a generation at the moment which have come into the workplace who will be changing jobs, changing careers throughout their career life cycle. But I think effectively it does present an opportunity for people to retrain, and that's something that they can do in the background whilst they're in job search mode, or once they've taken up a new job as a part-time.
And I think you have an experience of somebody that did that. They went into, I know people may not be thinking of doing this, but there's somebody that you know that went to be a van driver.
That's a bit of a sad story. And then he climbed up in the end, but he didn't retrain. Yeah,
right.
So the reality is that high-skill, high-paid, endurable jobs invariably require skills, which means you've got to sort of augment with a skill. But one of the persons I know who last time was in a recession and lost his job went from a top flight job to being a van driver, and eventually then actually went from being optimum choice through to their last resort, through to effectively what was at the end of the day a sort of compromise.
And I've seen people retrain, in previous economies where they went and got. I know somebody who went to be and decided to be a physiotherapist.
Yeah.
They were an alliance manager at an IT company, and they're now a physiotherapist.
That because I think as we get older, and let's say somebody's let go and they've been established into their working lives, people tend to know what they enjoy more, and that's what I would call a career change. Okay, so basically somebody's gone from being in IT or whatever, and they've gone to being a physiotherapist. That's what I call a career change. Yeah. But there's also what I call career realignment,
right?
Whereby somebody is doing something at the moment, and they're going to do something that's similar. And effectively, you can sort of explore different sort of ideas. But the point that you make is that really everybody needs to think, now's an opportunity to think about, are there different job types I'd like or skills that I'd like to pick up? And is there a course that I can undertake to help me sort of open up additional options?
Yes, and I think that the education option is, the Open University, local colleges, even the Cranfield universities are great places to coming out of the next year with an MBA, as long as you go and do and actually use that MBA is actually a great result.
Correct. And what actually happens is that basically people find it easier to perform in a job or easier to learn something when they're interested in that subject.
Yes.
And people naturally gravitate towards learning something that they've got an interest in. And therefore, this time around, their learning experience will be easier than when they were at school or university, because effectively you gravitate towards doing something in which you've got a genuine area of interest. So yes. Obviously, that's something that we're saying is a smart idea.
Yeah. Okay. So preferred realistic option.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. I think that if I can just step back for a second, what happens is that when people lose their jobs and they're in job search mode, people don't actually know how to look for a job.
Yes.
And this is a problem. And what sort of often will happen is that people will ask their friends, and their friends will give them ideas, but their friends aren't expert in job seeking either. And so what can happen is you can have a scenario of the blind leading the blind. Okay. Yeah. I'll talk about some tips just in a little while as to how somebody can best approach their job search. But the first thing that happens is when somebody's looking for a job, they don't know what they're looking for. Okay. They're in a bit of a haze. They lack a clarity as to what they're looking for. If they don't have a clarity as to what they're looking for, and if they don't have a direction, how are you going to find it? Okay. So if you say to somebody what kind of job is somebody after, they'll all ordinarily say, either I want something that's dreamy or I kind of don't know. Okay. And the solution to this is for people to come up with 3 jobs which are realistic that they can do, that give them different sort of options and give them multiple bets, so they don't put all their eggs in one basket. Okay, so effectively they'd come up with opportunity type 1, opportunity type 2, opportunity type 3, and on this here preferred realistic option, the pillar 4 is the dreamy thing. It's everything else. Okay, so effectively what happens is that they should come up with 3 different ideas, 1, 2, 3, the first of which being the one that they ideally will want most and is the most realistic one for them to sort of get. And those options would have certain sort of qualities. One would be the type of job, one would be the type of company, one would be the level of seniority, one would be the location. It would be things like that. And then you can have some nuances. If we were looking at somebody whose skills were in the telecoms area, you've got fixed line telecoms, you've got mobile telecoms, and you've got things like utility warehouse where they package and market something together. So you say, what type of companies are in there? So you can have multiple choices with regard to companies you could work for. Some of the things with regard to the type of jobs that somebody could do. I'm going to use something that's a bit left field here, but if we think of a plumber, you've got domestic plumbers, you've got industrial plumbers. Industrial plumbers would do things like put in place air conditioning in buildings. Yep. And you've got like, ships where you have plumbers on ships doing stuff with the engines or whatever. So it's almost so you can play around with these things a little bit. But the idea being is having a focus on 3 options for which you'd be realistically qualified.
And so in terms of that, it's about actually setting up those profiles, and also being in a situation where you may not just have one CV, you might have multiple ones. Correct.
So, the starting point for everybody should be to have a master CV.
Yeah.
And, right. So they'll have a master CV. And then from that master CV, you might actually choose to write 3 CVs. Yeah. One for opportunity 1, one for opportunity type 2, one for opportunity type 3. So you'd have, 1 master or 4 masters, depending on what you want. And then you can quickly tailor those for the individual applications that you're making.
So that may be based on that there's a requirement for a certain type of sales, like the difference between like account management and new business, or vertical market. So you need to have financial services rather than telco experience.
Correct.
That sort of thing.
Correct.
Because I'm guessing that in many cases now, whereas probably back in January you were one of, maybe there was a short list of a couple of people going for the job. Now it could be 10 or 20 people.
Correct. And that almost brings me on to something else that I'd like to sort of talk about in a minute, if you want to bring up the next slide.
Yeah. So while I'm doing that, what about things like interview experience? Because going for an interview itself is actually quite a difficult thing, and I think sometimes people don't realize that they actually need to have the type of skills that they need to run an interview.
Yeah, well, that's both on both sides of the table. So
Yeah.
that's candidate side and employer side. So with regards to interviewing, there's almost a whole new subject in its own right. I think the tip we would probably give people is for people to do role plays. Yeah, and that could be with your mum and dad, your brother, sister, an ex-work colleague, or whatever. The trick there would be just simply to do dry runs with
And I mean, the advice that I was always given is to treat it as a sale.
Correct.
And that when you go there, you're expected to say, if it's a sales role, you're expected to exhibit the skills of a salesperson.
Correct. I mean, when companies make hires, there's three qualities that they're looking for in a candidate. Whether or not you're hiring a chef or a chief executive, there's three qualities that every employer needs when they're going to make an offer, which are: one, can they do the job? Two, do they want the job? Three, will they fit in? And with regards to do they want the job, people offer jobs who come across as being enthusiastic. So you said that you think people should go into an interview as they're going in to make a sale, and sort of exactly right. It should be a mutual fact find, but basically employers offer people jobs when they see enthusiasm, they see somebody who wants to do that job.
Right. I mean, I've always been, I was always told to close at the end of the meeting.
Well, I think that's according to the level of seniority. That's sort of sensitive to the level of seniority of somebody interviewing. So if somebody's a senior exec or salesperson, they're going to be competent and confident to be able to close. Yeah? But if somebody's in another level of job, it's going to be more difficult. And therefore, the question that they should ask the interview at the end would be sort of one or two things. One could be, can you tell me what happens next? Which is a soft way to get them to open up as to, this is the interview process going forward and would like you to come back in. The other thing that they could say would be, going to tell me from what you've seen of me today, how do you feel about my suitability for the job? I think that in the context of talking about interviewing, this naturally brings us on to another subject, which is almost like, how many applications do you need to make to actually get to the interview in the first place? So if it's okay, what I'd like you to do is to bring up the next slide. And whilst you're doing that, I'll just continue talking about sort of interviews.
Okay. Is this not the next slide?
That's the one I wanted. Thanks. Yeah. So the point I wanted to make was that you've almost got, when somebody's in job search mode, you've got a need for them to apply quality and quantity in their job search efforts. So if we just work this backwards and we say, how many people attend interview with each company, for each company to make one offer, how many people would they interview? Tim, what do you think that would be?
I don't know. 3-5 people.
It's probably going to be 8.
Okay.
The company's probably going to interview as many as 8 people to make one job offer. Now, what that means is that somebody needs to get to 8 first interviews to get one job offer. Are you with me?
Yeah.
Then you've got to say, right, to get 8 first interviews, how many applications do I need to make? And if we look as to on something like LinkedIn and on other jobs boards, you can often see how many people have applied for a job. And often you'll see that 300 people have applied for the job that you're applying for. Now, what I'm advocating is a mixture of quality and quantity. So effectively, you go after jobs which you're well suited, and you spend more time going after jobs that you're well suited for, rather than attempting a scattergun approach. But if 1 in 10 applications that you make results in an interview invite, then by definition, you've got to make 80 qualified applications. Okay, so there's quite a lot of activity. So one of the things that happens with people when they're in job search mode is that they they don't know how to look for a job. Okay, and they use job search methods. They'll just use one or two when in fact there's 5. And what worked for them last time might not necessarily work for them this time. And the most significant way by which people find jobs is actually through networking. But effectively, people should, when they're thinking of their job search efforts, focus around 5 areas. And the first of which is your favorite subject, okay? And the first of which is what I call be found, okay?
Right.
So the first of which is that if it is that somebody's got the right LinkedIn profile in particular, it's not just LinkedIn. When I look at for candidates, I do a LinkedIn search and I search Google and I search other things as well. So each time, before I've spoken with somebody, I've looked across all of those things. But the point being is that they need a good LinkedIn profile, okay? And with a good LinkedIn profile, the market can come to you, okay? Right. So that's the first thing that they've got to do. The second thing that they need to do is go about networking with their friends. So that's like, who do I know? Who are my bosses, colleagues, past and present? Who do I know within my community? It might be people you buy from, it might be people that you sell to, it might be people that you partner with, people you work with. But effectively, we need to start building up a community with which you can network. So then the third thing is actually making direct applications. It's quite interesting, a lot of people would know who they want to work for, but they've not bothered to actually directly apply to that company. So
and when you say direct, sorry to butt in, Robert, when you say direct, because what I've done in the past is, because some people will go to the websites and then go, well, there's no sales jobs. I've actually rung up the sales manager.
Yeah. And I'm talking about something like that. So don't forget, not every person's a salesperson, not every person's outgoing.
I realise that, yeah.
But there's more than one way to do this. The important thing here is that, let's say somebody's in customer services, and on their doorstep, within 15 minutes drive or 15-minute cycle ride or 15 minutes on the tube, but let's say there's a local company in their area, which is the prime company in their market, for argument's sake, Vodafone or something like that, and they're in customer services. Well, actually, why not apply directly? And what I'm talking about here is phoning up if they want to phone up, speaking with their people network, maybe they can get an introduction, they can get a phone call or something like that, or dropping an email or an in-mail through to the decision maker. So effectively what I'm talking about is somebody would head up the customer services department. There may be multiple people who head up the customer services department. Why not get in touch with these people directly? That's what I'm talking about. And what can sometimes happen is that if you're an accountant, a project manager, whatever you were, and you put your CV into HR, it can get lost. Okay, they're looking at 300 applications. In some instances, they're expert. In some instances, they're novice. You might be a gem of a candidate, and for one reason or another, they might miss you out. And if it is that you are relevant to a prospective employer and you reach out to them directly, they're not going to do anything other than respond to you positively for applying direct. So what I'm saying is that somebody would send them an email, an in-mail, or look to get sort of introduced.
Okay, so in terms of social, it's about making sure that you update your profile.
So I mean, that's a whole subject in its own right. We'll talk about that another day. But importantly, here's the thing. One, their photo, they need to be looking at the camera. Yeah. 2, they need to be smiling. Okay. Yeah. And 3, they need to be looking reasonably professional. Today, I'm wearing a light blue shirt and wearing a V-neck jumper. It's very relatively neutral. It's reasonably professional. It's not too formal. Okay. Bang. Let's put on a smile. Yeah. And so they need to be looking at the camera and not wearing sunglasses. Very basic, but without those qualities, someone's looking at your LinkedIn profile, they're on to the next.
Yeah. Okay. It is, the glass of wine in Marbella from last year, again, is a complete no-no. It's a professional. Yeah.
So, right, then we got the next one, which is applying to job adverts.
Yeah.
Okay. And applying for job adverts can be a bit of a thankless task.
Yeah.
However, it's a massive source by which employers find people. People need to try all the job search methods. And there are companies actively looking for people of every type using advertising. People should get onto it. And if appropriate, use jobs board, but most certainly look for to respond to job adverts that are relevant to you in your area. Just a key point on that, ideally, you will tailor your messaging in your CV or in your application email so that it seems as though it's relevant to that company. So if, for argument's sake, we were looking at the company that's interested in apples, oranges, and pears, that effectively you're almost using those as, I've got those, or I've got experience dealing with those, rather than saying I've got experience of moving fridges,
Yes. And the job advert itself is in effect telling you their requirements.
Correct.
What you should be doing is basically matching back and saying, I have those qualities.
Yes. So then we've got the final one, which is almost something like, what I do, which is the final job search method is recruitment consultants, recruitment agencies, headhunters. When, recruiters are recruiting into vacancies, they're looking for square pegs for square holes. Yeah? And, it can be a bit of a long shot for people, but it is a genuine way in which you can find a job. Too many people think, I'm looking for a job, particularly people of an older generation. I'll get in touch with some headhunter recruiters. Okay? And they're not going to necessarily come up with anything. And 20 years ago, when companies made hires, they used lots and lots of recruitment consultants. These days, less so. They've got more of an inclination to hire directly. They can use LinkedIn to hire directly. The only instance where, when people are working with me and I'm recruiting into jobs and got candidates being put forward, is where they are square pegs for square holes. These are the best diamonds. They've got the clarity, they've got the cut, they've got the lot. Okay. And so basically it's one of many sort of methods. Just going back, the reality, it's a difficult time at the moment for people who are in job search mode. And there's one little trick that I'd like to suggest that people do, which I think will really help them. And that is as follows: to basically buddy up with other people who are job seekers. You can also actually, create little job search, communities. This is actually done and works very effectively.
Yep.
So, you could buddy up with one, you could buddy up with 3, 4 people with whom you can talk, you can check in on a daily basis, help you can keep your morale, look to throw around ideas, share ideas, etc., etc. And, in people's job search, they really do need to, buddy up with others and seek different perspectives, because otherwise, without doing so, they could, for argument's sake, be looking for something in the wrong way, and it's just going to cost them sort of time and money. But I think to end on a positive note, as I say, people apply themselves properly, they will get through this, and invariably at the end of the day, they'll end up being happy bunnies.
Yeah, I know someone that set up a Slack group in California. Obviously, it's not relevant for people in the UK, but there is an opportunity to set up communities of help. And I think we'll probably see more of that. And I agree with you that there is everybody, we've been through this. We've been through this before, and people will get through it and see it as an opportunity. And probably in 6 months' time, you'll look back and actually go, I'm actually happier where I am. And actually,
there is actually a lot. Yeah, there is a lot of that. Yeah?
Yes.
There's about 1/3 of people who will go through this ultimately will end up doing something that they prefer. Yeah.
Yes.
They did before.
Yeah. I agree. And so, Robert, that's been really interesting. Thank you very much.
We should be speaking with you today.
So you said that you've got this job seekers advice portal. So tell us about that, and you're going to give people access to it.
So with the job search advice portal, there's several things to it. There's loads of information, but the most important one in the context of our conversation is that there's a job search guide, and it starts off with what are you looking for, creating a CV, creating a LinkedIn profile, how to apply for jobs, how to interview, da-di-da-di-da. Okay, so that's the first one. The second thing that's got in there is that how do I go about career change? And so if my immediate job option is not available, how do I brainstorm other things that I can do? There's also other things in there, but effectively people can log on to bright-future.com. We're going to give them a free access code, and it will help them accelerate their job search. Books and portals are all very well. Going back to the point that I made earlier, buddy up with some people.
Okay, so it's bright-future.com.
Correct.
So how do they get? How do you get the free access code? Is that?
We're going to send it to them, or we'll just put it on here.
Okay, right. Okay,
yeah, we can pop it on at the end of the show.
Okay, and so in terms of was there anything else you wanted to particularly cover? Because we are at 29 minutes. 29
minutes. Well, I think you've done really well, Tim. And it's been fantastic to join you today.
Hey, it's great. You have so much. You have so much insight about the job market, and it's so important for people to, there's certain people that will never have been laid off before, and they don't know about these things, and it's really important that other people come on and share that, and hopefully we've helped at least one person. I'm
sure there'd be more than that. So yeah, good.
So remind people where they can get hold of you again.
So it's Robert Tearle, Tearle. I think if they look me up on LinkedIn, there's only 3 or 4 Robert Tearles. They'll be able to recognise my photo.
Yes.
I'm the only headhunter career coach, that's on there with the name Robert Tearle.
And your portal is bright-future.com.
Correct.
Cool. And if they have any questions about that, they can come to you anyway, can't they?
They can ping me an email or whatever. Yeah, to me an email.
Okay, cool. Okay, great. Thanks, Robert.
Tim, good to meet with you today. Good to
yeah. It's been really good. And thank you very much for spending the time and sharing your advice with everybody. It's difficult times, and as I said when we do the prep, anything that we can do, I think, to help people, I think is a good thing.
Sounds good.
Okay, thanks, Robert. Have a great day.
And you.
Thank you. Bye.